Oh, we're recording. Sorry about that. Hi guys, I'm Dr. Kristen Schromick. I am your one of your instructors for health psychology this semester. I'm recording this video because I want to give you an example of what we're looking for in terms of what you're going to be doing in class. So we'll talk to you about this whenever we meet with you on Wednesday, but basically you're going to have to do a research assignment where you write, and the writing is important. We don't want you to take that lightly, but it's not as important as what you do in the classroom. So the writing assignment or the research portion is really so that you can prepare for what to say in the class. And I'm going to try to use this as an example of what you can do in the classroom. So I'm kind of doing this off the cuff. Hopefully you'll have prepared even more than what I'm about to do. So I am going to share my screen. Let me see if I can show this to you. And yeah, so I am taking the idea of what you have to do for your assignment. So in your assignment, you're being asked to define the biopsychosocial model and then apply it. And I'm taking something similar. So I'm not doing the assignment for you, but I'm taking a similar idea and I'm going to define it and then I'm going to apply it. And then I will uh, try to identify for you what the biopsychosocial model is for what I'm about to discuss. So, the one part that I am missing is citing outside sources, but I will find something for you that's based on previous research that I've done that does apply, and I'll do a quick search with you while we're going over this together. Um, and I'm only doing that off the cuff because I have the background. The whole point of you doing the exercise is that you'll be doing this for the first time. And so I really want you to prepare as best as possible in that paper that you're going to be writing as a research assignment for the chapter. And then you're going to bring that knowledge with you to class. If you want to bring a little PowerPoint, fantastic. You don't have to, though. The whole idea is that you're able to talk about what you wrote about for a few minutes. We're looking for about like maybe I would say 3 to 5 minutes if you could just speak to us about what you researched and what you found. So I took the idea of the immigrant paradox, which is near and dear to me. The reason why I like this idea is because I am the child of an immigrant. So my mother is from Mexico, and I actually did my very first research job outside of my undergraduate degree. So whenever I finished with my bachelor's in psychology, I worked at the Health Science Center and I worked on a project in the nursing school, and it was kind of a big deal because it was funded through the National Institutes of Health, which is a big grant. So they offered a bunch of grant money to the PhD nurse that I was studying under, and the immigrant paradox is based on a problem. So it's a paradox because it doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. It's not what you would think. That's really what a paradox means. So the idea is that we would think that the United States, as like a richer country, as a first world country, would have better health outcomes for the people that live here and get to enjoy being in this richer country with all the resources that it has available to people, as opposed to coming from poorer countries or countries that are sometimes they're called third world. I don't think Mexico is a third world country, but it does have a very high number of people that are below the poverty line in Mexico. So, um, but the opposite is true. So we have Hispanics, largely from Mexico, but from other parts of Latin America that come to the United States. And what we see is that the people that are here for the um, the first generation, the immigrants that I should say the immigrants themselves, um, not the first generation, because the first generation will be their children. So the immigrants themselves, they actually have really good health outcomes in comparison to their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. So the longer that the immigrants stay here, they end up having worse and worse health outcomes. So this is true for Hispanics, which is why this was originally called the Hispanic paradox, but it's since shifted and now it's called the immigrant paradox because this is actually true for a lot of different countries and not just Mexico and not just Latin America. Um, so yeah, it's basically, they have the worst health outcomes. The things that we can see that they have a lot of challenges with are things that we're going to be covering in more depth throughout the semester, but things like heart disease, cancer, stroke, and these are some major causes of death in the United States. So these are also we'll come to learn are really kind of seated in behavior. So things that people do put them at risk for developing heart disease and cancer and stroke. So just to kind of recap on this slide, immigrants that come to the United States end up having better health outcomes in comparison to their children and their grandchildren and their great grandchildren. The longer that the immigrant lineage is here in the United States, they tend to do worse and worse. So I usually present this in class, but this is something that you can do as well. Come up with questions. Like we really want you to dig in and kind of think about these concepts in more detail. So I would pose to you guys, why do you think that immigrants might actually have better health outcomes than Americans or what are called Westerners, people in the Western world or the first world? And this isn't just true with health outcomes, it's also true with things like crime and education attainment. So they're usually lower, much lower on crime and much higher in how much education they get. So I'll let you entertain that on your own. And then one of the topics that's of interest, and it was of interest with the study that I was helping out with at the Health Science Center way back a long time ago, was this idea of acculturation, meaning that immigrants themselves hold on to a lot of their culture from their mother country, wherever it is that they came from, and their offspring, so their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so forth, end up kind of losing that and adopting more Americanized type culture. So the immigrants have social and cultural capital or things that are their resources, they're good for them, that native born, so the United States people that were born here, the American born children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren end up losing. So the things that the immigrants typically have, we can think about in terms of the biopsychosocial model, right? So some of the biological things that we can think about are the things we already talked about, the biological outcomes, right? Heart disease, cancer, stroke, those are things that are happening with the body. So it's a biological outcome. And then we're looking at the things that influence those outcomes, which are largely behaviors. And behaviors really are kind of having to do with where people are, the context in which they're raised, and the cultures, the cultural influences that they experience. So if we think about something like Mexican culture, which a lot of folks in San Antonio can relate to really easily, people that are from Mexico and Latin America in general tend to have stronger social networks. There's this really heavy emphasis on family and friends and having lots of social connections. So that's heavily emphasized in Mexican and Latin American culture, strong social networks. Um, they also have a stronger sense of identity as a consequence. So those are closely tied, and that the identity really comes from those relationships, but then also through some of the things that they do, even if it's by themselves, right? So religion is usually more heavily emphasized. Religion in and of itself. People tend to lose their religion whenever they come to the United States, but people that are from, these countries of origin like Mexico, a lot of times they do have a heavier emphasis on their religious beliefs. Whatever you think about religion, whether you're for it or against it, one way you can kind of think about it in a very objective way is that whenever we release responsibility, right? So we don't necessarily have to um, be, responsible for everything that happens in our life. We're kind of giving that up to a higher power. That's very relieving, right? So it feels it's de-stressing. So that's very, very nice. Also, I should back up a little bit about the social networks. If I haven't already said this in the past, or if you haven't heard it from other places, if you haven't been in my class before, this idea of like collectivism versus individualism. The United States is a very individualistic country, whereas Latin American countries and most of other countries that aren't westernized, right? The westernized countries are like your white countries, if you will. The United States and most of Europe, Australia, those are westernized. But most of the rest of the world is very collectivist, meaning that they're interested in the whole group and what's good for the whole group, as opposed to what's good for the individual, which is what individualistic countries would focus on. So that ties in really well with this idea of religion, right? Because um, uh, whenever you're concerned with the group, well, other people are concerned for you too, as opposed to if you're in an individualistic person or you ascribe to that way of thinking because you're part of a Western world, everything's your responsibility. Everything is up to you, and you can't really relinquish responsibility to other people or maybe to a higher power, right? Where you're relieving yourself of some of that stress. Everything that's going on in your life that's wrong isn't necessarily your fault all of the time, right? You can kind of leave things up to God, if you will. Okay, so hopefully that makes more sense. Stronger social networks, collectivist culture, this idea of religion, both of those are examples of relieving yourselves of responsibility. There's also in diet, there's this heavy emphasis on nutrition having to do with whole foods. So we have a store in the United States, a store chain called Whole Foods. Oddly enough, that's owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, but that's neither here nor there. Whole foods are actual fruits and vegetables that are fresh and you eat them whole. You don't eat them processed, right? So processed foods are all the things that come in boxes and cans and they're already made for you and they have to have a lot of times like preservatives or additives to kind of give them a certain texture, quality, or color. Uh, so a lot of times these origin countries like Mexico and Latin America and beyond, they tend to focus a lot on whole foods. I know whenever I was growing up and I would go to Mexico City sometimes to visit my extended family there, and I would spend good chunks of time. And one of the practices that my great aunt would have was going to the market every single day. Literally every day we would go to the market to get food. And it was always fresh food, and she would bring the fresh food home, and she would make it. So that was a daily practice. Um, Also, there's this idea of substance use. So substance use is usually frowned upon in these countries of origin. Um, and if it is engaged in, it's usually in a much more social way. The emphasis isn't on the substance, the emphasis is on the togetherness or socializing, and substance kind of takes a secondary role as opposed to being on the forefront, like we're here to get drunk, right? Or we're here to use this particular substance. Also, if people tend to have stronger social networks, stronger social ties, a lot of times they don't really they're less likely, those are protective factors for them to not engage in substance use. That's not always the rule, but it's a good protective factor. um, Also with parenting in the United States, a lot of times whenever you see like Latin American families in particular, after they've kind of been here for multiple generations, you may see that there's single parent households where the mother is working on her own and maybe raising children, or it's kind of like a broken family type of a system, as opposed to whenever the immigrants come from their country, those couples tend to stand the test of time. So they have very traditional roles where the father will work and the woman, the mother will stay home with the children. And she may work, but she might work very sparingly or, only doing things like when the kids are at school and making sure that she's back home to take care of business. But those strict rules are also protective because they're keeping the house in a particular order. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and the children also kind of have the backbone of the mother always being there to take care of them. And I'm not saying this is always the case, but I'm saying that those again are cultural practices that are going to make that family system stronger and more likely for the children to kind of feel better supported. All of these different things that I just described, in addition to cultural practices like the types of foods that are eaten, the the holidays and the way of life, the things that are considered cultural norms, acceptable behaviors that everybody engages in, it really gives people a strong sense of ethnic identity and the behaviors and also their sense of self with that ethnic identity. That's really the psychological portion, right? The behavior that they're engaging in, how they think about themselves. That's the psychology piece. So we have these health outcomes, cancer, disease, heart disease, stroke, as some examples that happen with the body. And we have these social reasons why we think this is happening because of what's happening in the social context with people. And then we also have the psychological aspect of like stress, this idea of ethnic identity, and all these health behaviors that we were talking about that play into this. So here we have the biopsychosocial model. All three portions are represented here. So I also ask you to think about this. What can we learn from the Hispanic paradox? What types of mindsets and behaviors might we improve as Americans? How can we make ourselves better? So those are some things to consider. And then also, I did mention that I would want you to include um, an outside source. So I'm actually just going to look this up really quickly and see if I can find some things that I just mentioned. And let's see if we can just look up the World Health Organization. Of course, you would be doing this in advance in your paper, not on the fly like I'm doing it right now, because you're turning in your paper before you come into class. But so if I look up, let's see, I'm looking at the World Health Organization and seeing if perhaps I can find something on the Hispanic paradox that helps us understand it even better than we did just now with my explanations. But let's see if we find it. Okay. Um, so this is kind of good. I like this because this is counterintuitive. And I love it whenever things contradict each other. I know that maybe you won't like that, but the reason why I like it is because it shows that there's complexity and that things aren't so simple. So this is from the World Health Organization, and this is talking about the poorer health outcomes of vulnerable refugees. So this is interesting because this is an encounter to or contradiction to what I just mentioned about the immigrant paradox. But yeah, so around the world, millions of refugees and migrants in vulnerable situations, such as low-skilled migrant workers, face poorer health outcomes than their host communities, especially where living and working conditions are substandard. This has dire consequences for the probability that the world will not achieve the health-related sustainable development goals for these populations. That's interesting. Okay, so this is actually saying that they have worse outcomes. And I think the migrant workers and the refugees might be special groups, just because usually refugees are displaced because of some kind of event that's happened in their country. And then there's also migrant workers are kind of in extenuating circumstances where they're usually migrating to places to do like the like tending to crops usually is a lot of times what they will end up working on. Um, let's see if we can just look up something. I'm just going to look up Google Scholar and see if I can find anything there. Of course, what you would want to do is you would find these and then you would summarize some of the information and make sure you include the APA. So hopefully you can still see my screen. Am I still showing you the right? Yes, I am showing you the same screen. Okay, good. So here I've got uh, the immigrant paradox. I just use Google Scholar. If you're not familiar with Google Scholar, it's something you'll definitely want to acquaint yourself with. But you can just go to Google Scholar, and I just looked up immigrant paradox. I didn't mean to look up mental health, but let's see if we can find anything. It looks like this isn't. Oh, this is a meta-analysis from 2021. That's very nice. So a meta-analysis is actually a study of studies. So they're looking at a bunch of studies and piling all that data together or compiling all that data together. So this is the immigrant paradox and the problem behaviors of youth. So this meta-analysis synthesizes the data among foreign and US born youth and explores the effects of immigrant status on youth, internalizing and externalizing problems. Um, so the results indicated that foreign born youth reported significantly more internalizing problems and few externalizing problems. Gender and sample type moderated the effects. The findings provided a first step toward reconciling mixed support for the immigrant paradox by identifying for whom and under what conditions. So good. This is additional kind of complexity surrounding this issue. This is talking about how basically the people that are coming here from their mother country, they maybe aren't getting into trouble, right? They're internalizing their problems. Maybe they're having more mental health type issues, whereas the kids that are born in the United States that are the children of immigrants or maybe, grandchildren and so forth, they're going to externalize their behavior, meaning they're probably going to get into trouble. They're going to do bad things, right? So they feel like if they feel bad, then they may, engage in riskier behavior. Whereas the immigrants maybe don't engage in the risky behavior, do bad things, and get into trouble, but they're still having internal problems, so psychological or mental health type issues. All right, so that concludes my rough cut of a presentation. I just wanted to give you guys an example of something that I'm looking for. The the presentation, honestly, this isn't fantastic. I would want you guys to do a little bit better than this, but in terms of the polish, right? So make sure that you think about it a little bit. That's the whole point of you writing the document. It should be fresh on your mind. You'll submit it no later than the night before, and then you're going to be sharing what you found with the class, and we're going to be talking about it together. The whole point is for us to engage in discussion, and you're going to have something meaningful to say because you will have researched it on your own, and then also we will have interesting things to say or insights into other people's mini presentations or what they're discussing with the group, because they're going to tell us cool stuff that relates to the topic, and we're going to already have thought about it, so we'll have something interesting to say as well. So that's pretty much it. I guess one other quick thing that I want to show you if I can before I jump off here is I want to show you the way to cite. So this is just quick and dirty. I remember I just found this from 2021 here, right? So you can just click down here and it says cite, and then you go to APA. Remember, we use APA because the American Psychological Association, psychology, this is a psychology course, but you can find that right there, and you can literally just copy that and paste it into your reference list. Now, if you're doing the citation inside of the document, like if you write a summary of the information that you found from that source, in the paragraph, like at the end of the paragraph, you would just do Tilly, and it's ETAL, so ET space AL period, comma, 2021. and you put that inside of parentheses. It's Tilly because it's the first author and it's 2021 because that's the year of publication. The ETAL, that's Latin for and colleagues or and others. And of course, I can fill you in on more details about this if you have questions or if you need me to explain more. But yeah, all right. Hopefully that makes more sense. If you have anything to ask, please let us know. All right.